For today's meditation, we are reading from the book of Judges, chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give to your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars. But you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. When Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. The events of Judges took place in the period between Joshua's death and the days of Samuel. Its theme is a downward spiral of Israel's national and spiritual life into chaos and apostasy. A recurring phrase that we see in the book of Judges was, in those days there was no king in Israel and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It is a human tendency to do the minimum necessary for life and make peace with the status quo. The Israelites had been slaves in Egypt with no rights and no resting place. After they were delivered from the hand of Pharaoh, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Now they have come to the promised land and have conquered most of it. They slipped into complacency. Once they had a place to stay and food to eat, they forgot what God had asked them to do. God had promised them to drive out all the inhabitants in the land of Canaan. But they did not drive out the Canaanites completely, nor pull down their altars. These were enough to corrupt the Israelites and lead them to worship idols and follow the evil practices of the inhabitants. The scripture says that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Solomon says in a Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 15, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. In chapter 1 of Judges, we see a list of kings and groups the Israelites conquered. Those victories were great to mention. But sadly, we also see a list of inhabitants that they did not drive out. The repeated statement about them is that so the Canaanites lived among them but became subject to forced labor. What was the danger associated with this? In human wisdom, this may seem a better choice than killing them off. In our human understanding, we may use them for our forced labor and the necessities as servants. But these were people who had lived in rebellion and sinned for centuries, even after repeated warnings and testimonies through God's people. They had crossed every boundary of God's creation and moral order. When you allow such a group to live among you, there is inevitable mingling with their culture and agreement with their values. There was every possibility that the next generation would end up intermarrying with them. God had warned them through Moses that such a situation would take their hearts away from worshipping the true God. They had the bad experience of Baal Peor before them. In this chapter, we see the angel of the Lord confronting the people of Israel for their disobedience at Bochim. He reminded the words of the Lord spoken to their fathers, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? The remaining Canaanites became thorns in their sides, and their gods a snare to Israel. In the history of Israel's revival during the period of the kings, a statement that we see again and again is that the high places were not removed, and people used to use them for pagan worship. A thorough cleansing was not done in the land. The Lord often reminds us of small sins of omission, just like the Israelites. When we neglect to take action, these sins become a snare to us and take us away from God. Our small indulgences, innocent as they seem, might lead to our ineffectiveness as believers. Let us constantly search our hearts to see if there are still high places in our lives. Sins like gluttony, wasting of time surfing the internet, procrastination of essential things, neglect of family, ambition for money and position and prestige that may lead to our ineffectiveness as believers. The first step is often the hardest. We need to decide to begin the battle before we can overcome these sins with God's might to back us. We must not persuade ourselves that these will be of benefit to us. We must not enjoy the forced labor they represent for us. They will be our downfall if we do not deal with them thoroughly. Hebrews 12:1 warns us, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Let us be diligent in driving out the enemies of God from our lives and run our race with perseverance to receive our reward. God bless.